My name is Mark Dittmer, and I'm a screenaholic. Welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Dylan Kelly, who I knew through his parents and my parents lived next to each other for about 30 years, from like 1990 to 2020, and we didn't know each other well. He was 6 to 10 years older than me, and still is, and uh, when I was about 20, though, I was traveling in Mexico, and my friend and I met a couple of other people from the Bay Area, travelers, and they knew Dylan Kelly. It was a crazy, meeting in Mexico City of people who happened to know the same person in a suburb of the Bay Area. And maybe 15 years after that, I was living back in the Bay Area, and I was volunteering at the Sterling Institute of Relationship, which puts on the Sterling Men's Weekend, Sterling Women's Weekend. And it turned out that in the office building where I was volunteering every week, there was a window washing business called Mr. Sparkle. And that window washing business was owned by Dylan Kelly. So somehow I think through his dad, who still lived next to my parents, I reached out to him, had his number for a minute, but nothing came of it. I don't think we ever caught up. And then maybe 5 or 10 years later, in 2021 or 2022, he came to one of my men's team's meetings. His a realtor who worked with him was on my men's team, and he came, and so I saw. I was like, oh my gosh, it's there he is again. So we kept bumping into each other, and we got to talking at that meeting, at that particular meeting, and thought he would be a good guest to have on the podcast. So I hope you'll agree. His work with Mr. Sparkle in particular, and the fact that that business ended during the pandemic, as so many businesses did, struck me as something interesting to talk about. And so we spent most of our time talking about that, his career as an entrepreneur, and how that was affected by the pandemic and what happened. And it was great to have him on. Speaking of entrepreneurship, it has occurred to me to ask you, the viewer, to visit my Substack at marginnotes8.substack.com, and perhaps subscribe. I mean, pretty much everything on the Substack is free, but if you'd like to make a contribution because you want to see more of these podcasts, I'm pretty sure on Substack there's an option to do that. And I haven't made any money off of this yet. Well, I don't need to open my books to you. I'm just saying though that well, let me tell you a little bit more about what I'm saying here. I had some ideas recently to do some podcasts about sports, and in particular, like, saving sports being where sports appear to be in danger. Like, for example, in baseball in Oakland, the A's are in potentially their last year in Oakland. And there's other stories like that. Tackle football was almost illegalized in California earlier this year. There's various bizarre stories that come up that actually seem to put sports in danger, and I thought I could do some interesting stories on that. So that idea came to me, and I hadn't put any interview requests together yet, and I haven't had a sports-themed episode yet. But then, before I could, the opportunity came up more recently that I got, like, there's a high school baseball team in my vicinity that needed a coach, and would I be interested in coaching that team? And I said yes. Now, as a result of saying yes, I'm going to have a lot less time to do sports-related podcasts, and that's kind of how this is working. Like, I love this podcast, and I'm going to keep doing it, but I would do more of it if I thought I could make any money doing it. So if you think I could make money doing it, and if you want to provide some of that money, I don't want to stop you, and I want there to be an easy way for you to do it. And the Substack you should check out even if you're not going to spend any money, because it's got some interesting links and some writing I've done. Again, that website is Margin Notes 8, MARGINNOTES, the number 8.substack.com. So there's that. Now, this is episode 13 of the podcast, and I just want to say that that's okay. before I even knew anything about the number 13 being any kind of whatever, I thought it was a cool number. You know, it's a two-digit prime number, and it's like the lowest two-digit prime number. It's not. 11 is the lowest two-digit prime, but 11 doesn't really feel prime. It's so 11 is so easy to do stuff with. So in a way, it's just it doesn't feel weird enough. 13 is plenty weird, and it's kind of interesting how it goes with 7, 13, and 7, because they both have their luck that's supposed to go with them, and they kind of fit together well. But in any case, 13 is cool. Don't be afraid of 13. It's a great episode. This is Dylan Kelly, and thanks for watching Screenaholics. Like and subscribe. Have a blessed day. But okay, big theme is the new normal.
New normal. Okay, that's the topic tonight.
Yeah, yeah. Because you and I talked about it a little bit before, and I feel like you have you have a not a, I wouldn't say a unique perspective, but I don't know, very like an interesting perspective because you were affected by it.
Oh God, tell me what it was.
Yeah, right. I better not. I better let you. I better let you.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell me what it was.
Well, okay. So we're talking new normal, right? Which is kind of a buzzword, right? So
Yeah.
I want to just define some terms here, like so
Yeah,
we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Talking new normal in the context of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Is there any broader context to that, or like when you talk about the new normal, like are you just looking for like what do I think? Like when I look outside my eyes into the world, what do I see post pandemic? If we're going to call this post pandemic, or are you asking me, do I see a new milieu rising on the horizon that we're moving into, and in a broader context, like globalism, part of all that type of stuff? What's the or are you just interested in seeing like how do I see it?
No, thank you. Yeah, I all of the above. So let's start with because I think I like making generalizations about our time, right?
Okay.
Like it's kind of we get to have some fun. It's fun to do that. It's fun to observe ourselves in time, like make observations about the culture and whatnot. But but the pandemic was a real even though the pandemic, things change constantly. So these are all generalizations and whatnot. But still, the pandemic was a big deal.
Yeah.
That we had to get through, and then there is a sense of going back to normal afterward. But before we get there, maybe can you talk about your experience of the pandemic? So because in particular, and I'm just maybe to introduce you to viewers, and it's not because you suffered with the worst case of COVID-19 of all time that you have a unique experience about it. But yeah, tell me about what's your experience of the pandemic. It's not about so much getting go ahead.
Well, I mean, again, I think that's a really broad question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I think what you're getting at is, the loss of a business really well established.
Yes.
My opinion, and I probably suspect yours and anyone else would say a well-loved business. It wasn't, and one that had healthy relationship largely with the folks that were in it. There were no real obvious reasons why that business should not be able to carry on. There's a lot of other home service companies that didn't experience what I experienced, right? So from a business lens, there were some options. Definitely it was get back in the trenches and rebuild and reboot, right? To understand my personal decisions about why I decided, okay, we're just going to fold this thing up. You kind of have to have been through that journey. So, having been through a 20-year journey with a business and, having cleaned house a couple times where, you break down to about half staff and you retrain and reboot, and having been through that process a couple times and coming to it at that stage, after the first stay at home order, we didn't have everyone return back to work. So we had to retrain. and we retrained, which is, it's not a small thing to take a 30% of your staff and retrain. Not when you're delivering like really high end service. And that's part of what we did. Like what we did was deliver super couture service with super high levels of efficiency. Internally, we were delivering and executing at such, in my opinion, a high level, not only of service, but of customer service. And everything was so tight that the disruption to that system wasn't sustainable continuously. And faced again at the beginning of 2021 with another group of folks that were just like starting to get concerned about, pandemic related stuff. I think another round of COVID or something. I had very few people that were like ready to work.
Well,
right?
I think there's one of those. So yeah, but I dive in sometimes, and it always helps me to go backwards. So like, and what you're getting at is almost like you mentioned the service level that you had. So like, I think it should go back to like what it was like for you to set up a business. Like, how does one?
Oh, you want to talk?
Yeah.
Well, okay. All right. So we're coming. Are we coming to the new normal? But we're going to start start with growing a business.
Yeah. So like that's the baseline. That's the old.
Well, what is it to grow a business?
Used to be like.
I mean, look, everybody's journey is different, right?
Yep.
Some people pick up a business of their parents and reiterate it or grow it. Others just step into their parents' shoes and run exactly the way their parents did.
Yep.
Some move in with a lot of capital, and some with their bootstraps only. And for myself at the time, it was bootstraps. And a lot of elbow grease. When you scrap real hard to put something together, it creates a bond of trauma. And then, to be fair, after that, it then got this gloss, this good shiny coat of paint, which was a really great brand. And to be fair, I think an intelligent, capable leader myself, right? So like not a lot of like home service companies are run by people who, with my level of enthusiasm, with my level of articulation, with my history with the area. I mean, like I just had a lot of things going for me. I think that it was, let's say I was playing in, I don't want to say big fish, small pond, because that's not quite right. Like
Bay Area is a pretty big pond, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is like, I'm an articulate guy who was washing windows.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know what I mean? Like I could talk to Sally homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So not everyone can talk to Sally homeowner. And Sally homeowner was used to talking to people who can't talk to her to get her services done. But when she finds someone that kind of looks and sounds like her,
yeah,
right, and read the same thing and maybe listened to the same news or podcast or whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? When there was enough parallels between the service provider and the person, and then laying on top of it a really nice brand, that was a lot of what was being sold, right? Like, I mean, to be fair, our prices were middle to middle high in the market. There were other people charging way more than us that weren't delivering what we were delivering. And frankly, had we been doing that, we would have been in a better situation. Had I had fewer employees, charged more, and delivered less, I'd have been in a better situation financially. Now, emotionally, and so coming back to the original question, starting a business, people do them for all types of reasons. Sometimes people just can't work for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people are like this dream of making like lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows, right? And for myself, it was like I was trying to carve out a little space for myself and for the people who worked with me, man. That was like a place that I could go every day without wanting to put a fucking gun in my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a that's like a that's the unofficial motto of a lot of things and places. So didn't you also try other like I think you told me you were you had wanted to start a business for some time.
I mean, entrepreneurship is is it's a disease.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I say that tongue in cheek, right? But it is a compulsion, right? Like and it has there's a lot of things that feed it, and some can be like, a desire for autonomy, or take that to a further end of the spectrum, inability to work with others. You know what I mean? Like all these things, right? A level of creativity and like ideas, and a frustration of not being able to execute ideas when working in other types of team settings. Those are, I think, a lot of times the traits of an entrepreneur. And then other things can factor in there, like, the desire for the reward theory, et cetera, or, appeal with risk, or really just having a dream of like, giving everyone the best hot dog. You know what I mean? Like delivering something that the bun that no one's ever, like, this is the best hot dog bun, right? Like being really like whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Was there a early any could you as a teenager even come up with the idea, because it's weird, because entrepreneurship, like, the word seems out of the grasp of a teen, like, it doesn't seem like a thing that young people could imagine, but maybe they could, because like a lot of business, like running a business, I mean, young people set up lemonade stands and stuff, but it's just still like there seems to be like a barrier of entry, just like the idea that it takes like a imagination. But still, like when you're a kid, they kind of tell you imagination is like, well, creative writing or poetry or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
When did you start like putting your imagination toward a business? Yeah.
It's hard to say. Probably some of the examples would be newspaper routes, and then again, opportunities in the late 70s, early 80s for a person, babysitting, lawn mowing, house cleaning, painting. Like kids did all that stuff back then, and I imagine different geographies that's still happening, but by and large, in most of the middle class neighborhoods now, you don't see the 13-year-old kid painting the house. But, for sure, I had friends my parents were like, hey, the paint supplies and the ladder is in the garage.
Yeah.
Right? So, those experiences and those opportunities inform one's personal sense and agency with regards to that type of risk. Like if you've been on a ladder for the last 7 years, right, with no supervision, like you start to get really good at it, right?
Okay, yeah.
And like nowadays, the question of like whether a kid has a strategy for sweeping a driveway or could change a light bulb in a room properly, like go to the closet and change the light bulb. Like, are they going to actually pull out a 75 watt to match the bulb that was in there? Or if there's an assortment, are they just going to pick the one closest to the front? Because my experience is that as we've gone on, and this is not necessarily ubiquitous, my personal experience, most kids are showing up, and I say kids, young people are showing up without those basic skills. Now, to be fair, they can change the display on my monitor. And for me, that's a Google search and mussing around and probably frustration and 3 cups of coffee, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to sweeping my driveway or washing my car, or for that matter, folding my clothes or making my bed, like that shit just happens because it was an expectation. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think like some of that, that, at least personally, and for people that I know, my generation, like that's what informs it. It's like you get your chops, you get your chops with chores, you get your chops with neighbors giving you opportunities, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So it's like that does go right back to the teenage, because those are the teenage jobs of like the paper route and the
it's formative,
watering down the street. So you and I grew up you moved to the street where I grew up.
My parents did.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually, okay, so yeah.
I lived there shortly upon returning from basic training, after into the reserves, I had it's where I landed until I found a place and got my legs. Yeah, but I was there for about 6 months or something.
Okay, all right, yeah. I was going to tell you which house I watered the backyard of. It was Piedmont, was where this was, had some like special like teenage clearinghouse of jobs where you would get, I forget what they had an acronym for it, but you could you'd get your jobs doing yard work, a lot of
really?
yard work, yeah.
Oh, so that was still a thing.
Yeah,
I'm going to bet you it's not there anymore.
Yeah, there's a good. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
that's definitely possible. Well, so okay, so you went through the, so you served in the armed forces, and then okay. Not so tangential to this, I guess. But thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right. It was the reserves. It was
right on.
Yeah, I mean, there's some risk involved, but
yeah,
people, especially nowadays, there's so many people have done so much.
Yeah,
on that front that I'm always afraid of that kind of stolen valor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But anyway, okay, we move on.
Yeah. So then you started and you went through any of those. Any of your other business ideas come anywhere close to Mr. Sparkle? Like,
no, it's a great question, and there was home brewing kits was one of my first.
Okay.
I think real efforts, and back in the late '80s, early '90s, home brewing wasn't really. I mean, it was a thing, but old guys did it, right? Like old gray-haired retired guys did it.
Yeah.
And it was like a small club, of like beer lovers. But they weren't selling, or they probably were somewhere, but they weren't really selling like a 5-gallon bucket with all the stuff in it. And so that was like an idea that I had, like, but I was 18. Okay. I wasn't even 21, right? Yeah. But I had this idea of like you could sell these like brew making kits, and like not long after that, like they started doing that, right? No, just Sierra Nevada happened, Samuel Adams, with all these things have been around, but people like this whole like awareness of something above Coors and Bud Light and Miller started to happen, right? So I just as an example of timing, like I wasn't the right age, it was early in my attempts, and so probably stick-to-itiveness and a lot of other things weren't in my favor, right? And then the idea was just too early, man.
Yeah,
the idea was too early.
Yeah.
And so the number of products, I mean, I had a patent pending, and the number of things that I've built and the number of like brands that I've imagined and the number of efforts are not countless, but numerous. And so I think one of the other really important things, and I know you were listening to Guy Raz. He's got a podcast. I think it's Guy Raz does a podcast. How I Built This. He talks to like entrepreneurs.
Okay,
it's a good one. But almost never you listen to this thing and hear someone say, "I was extremely fucking fortunate." And, I worked really hard. Yeah, I'm clever, right? But I also grew up in the Bay Area in the 80s with parents that had money, got to go to school, right?
Yeah.
Had people that supported me, people that believed in me and told me I could do it, a community that engaged and bought my service, a housing market that was turning over for the first time really in the history. We saw people who had lived in their homes 40, 50 years start to retire and move out of their homes, sell their homes, and this new vibe of like, staging houses. And people didn't do that in the 70s, you know what I mean? They didn't stage their house. But, cleaning the house, painting it, like this whole like rebranding the house was happening. And window washing was like, so that was like, it was just, we caught this wave, right, of just good fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the right age, right?
Yeah.
I had my back up against the wall. I had a kid coming and I had like $70 in the bank. You know what I mean? Like all those things that I think one hears often around success stories that make them dramatic, those were there. But part of it is like I had really fucking incredible people working with me, like super, super dedicated, super, super loyal until they weren't. But I mean, the dream was always for these people. This was always a stepping stone. Not many people were going to like help grow that business. I did have guys that had tenure of 10 plus years. But largely, that idea that, we do these things on our own is comical. It's like a talk show host.
Yeah.
It's like a talk show host.
Yeah.
How many people are running cameras and organizing and arranging and driving cars and makeup and, what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not,
So let me say that too. Huge amount of luck.
Yeah.
Along with the real hard work.
Yeah.
And then we could call it luck. And then a lot of other people, a lot of other players. It wasn't a solo mission.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so that's almost 20 years that you were right. If you were,
it was 20 years.
Your kid was on the way. Your kid is about 20, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a trip. That's a long journey. So then okay, and so we get to now we get to the 2020 or so, or we're in. I saw somebody at my work today was wearing the mask because she was sick or whatever. And I said, oh, you're wearing some fat. It's like you're bringing back the fashion of 2022. And I guess it got caught. I think it got taken as some kind of political comment or something like that. But I don't know. I'm just trying to,
Well, I think it's fair to say that, in my opinion, and everyone's going to say different, see and feel different things.
Yeah.
I think masks were politicized, so it's
right.
fair. I mean, it's almost like not using the right fucking pronoun,
right,
to like call someone out on a mask.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But and to be fair, like the flu sucks. No one wants the fucking flu.
That's right. That's true.
Right, but just wait. If we're even around for the time when they unpack this shit, it's gonna be, yeah.
So what was like? What did it mean to? Oh, all right, you got your shot there. What did it mean for you? Right off the bat, like, there was a, this thing came down. I remember, in 2020 we start out hearing that it's, in another country. And it all gets here in March, and we all go into our houses, and then for 2 weeks, and then 4 weeks, and whatever. I guess businesses like construction went back to work fairly quickly, right? Like the building industry.
It depended.
Yeah. Like, so what about like? Because I guess you work adjacent to certain, but like you don't work with construction people. You work with You work in houses that are places that are already built, pretty much, right?
Yeah, we did. But we worked. We did post construction, and we did commercial stuff, and we did residential stuff, and we had clients where they were going to have a little more strict standards because they had facility managers and they had criteria and lawyers that had drawn up protocols and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that stuff was so ad hoc, and really. Here's the thing. There's a lot of ways to look at this. My fucking politics were not in alignment with the response that our government had. It wasn't in alignment with my friends. It wasn't in alignment with my employees. It wasn't in alignment. It was more in alignment with red states somehow.
Yeah.
Except that I'm not particularly fanatical.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't really like, so.
I might sound like a fanatic, but I'm really not.
No, I'm in a similar boat. Like it's been, it's weird because I always did line up with the lib point of view up until about like 2018, 2019, where I was kind of starting to like really waver. I don't know, and and whatever. And I'm not fanatical either. I don't like. I was thinking about like my political opinions changing has made so little difference in my life. It's like not really.
That's an interesting point.
I never went back and I don't have to go back and be like, oh, I have to undo all the things that I did based on those because they're like political beliefs that don't guide that many of my actions,
Oh,
or at least this, it seems like.
okay.
Uh, but anyway, like it just seemed like this I don't know, with the pandemic.
So let's
Yeah.
let's cut the.
Yeah,
A lot of what closing the business was like. I was fucking done with it.
yeah,
I was just done with all the bullshit. I was
Yeah.
done with what I felt were like not just whether or not they were lies or deliberate. They were cockamamie, in my opinion.
yeah,
The idea that look, you can go to any fucking OSHA manual
yeah,
and a dust mask isn't going to cut it for
Right.
a biohazard.
right,
It
right,
doesn't. It
right.
doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut it if you're going to clean up sewage that spilled out of a bathroom and you got a cleaner going in that. If they're following OSHA standards, they've got to have a medical consultation, been trained on form-fitting mask, and then have a mask that's fitted to their face. And we're talking about full coverage. That's for response to a biohazard, which is what we were being told. And it's just asinine. And not only that, any nurse will tell you there's basically the size. If you take a virus, the size of a Grand Canyon gap, or even these ones that are basically formed, it's asinine.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
that's an opinion,
yeah, yeah.
and that's
right.
my opinion.
Well said.
And I
yeah.
stand by it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And if here's the thing. Here's what was interesting is that we did have a civil response, but it wasn't in alignment with that.
civil response. What's
We
that?
did have a civil response.
What do you mean?
But the Black Lives Matter movement happened right on the tails of
Okay.
and during COVID.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, there is this explosion that's displaced. Now it's ironic because the challenge is you've got people who are like, we're tired of being controlled.
Yeah,
And then they want you to wear a fucking mask and call them they.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Right? You've got people who, and I'm not generalizing women here, but I'm a freedom of choice person. Like I
Yeah.
think for a family or for a woman, like that is not to be I mean, it's to be legislated that they should have the right, but
choose.
that's not
Okay.
okay. But that same and I haven't done a poll,
Mhm.
but my bet
Mhm.
is that had you gone across the country and asked the people who believed in freedom of choice if they were for vaccines, they just said, "Oh yeah, mandate the fucking vaccines,
Right.
mandate masks." Right? So tell me what to do with my body,
Uh huh.
but don't tell me what to do with my body.
Uh huh.
You get what I mean?
I do.
And so there's this pent up rage really about social injustice, whether it be gender or race or right. And you get this Floyd guy who can't breathe, and frankly, I couldn't breathe with one of those fucking masks on my face. They made me anxious.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they made me angry.
Yeah.
And so, I worked. Let's be fair. You asked a great question, and you drew a picture from my childhood all the way to 30, which was the beginning of a 20-year journey of a lot of hard work and my entire life's investment, not only my hours of my day, but all of my dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I closed that business, I was standing by my politics, and it was a really tough choice because there wasn't anyone standing next to me when I did it.
Yeah.
That I shouldn't say that. Absolutely, that's not true. But in terms of who was going to pay for it, it was myself largely. My wife, my kid, they were going to be affected by that. But but really, it was myself. It was everything that I had worked on my entire life had brought me to that moment, and it was a pretty tough place to be, man.
Well, what it brings home to me is like, I was saying that my politics don't often affect my life, but I think that's part of why I'm interested in what your story around this is, because as a business owner, you're more invested. Like if you're right, like there's a. Certain things I think invest. I heard one comedian say that like people who either have a kid or own a home or own a business should, like, their votes should count for more. But in this case, I could see how owning the business, like the politics would be like, it comes right up to you, like, like here for me, it's like, oh, I hear about things that are being closed and open, and it's like, well, it doesn't affect me. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So, but
Well, it does, but it doesn't. Yeah.
yeah, in like a more distant way. But so I guess this is like, yeah, it affected you in the sense that you were being told all these things like about how to operate, or like when you could, when you couldn't, and just
Yeah.
and
And not only that, but it wasn't really that great of information.
yeah,
And the people who, we had relationships with, who, you would normally kind of go to in times of crisis, were getting the same mixed information. So they're really, I think the people who made it through all of that were people who were like, put your mask on, right?
yep,
Stand in front of the thermometer, fill out the chart, and go do your job.
yeah,
You get what I mean?
yeah,
And so part of that, part of what was just vented, what I just vented, right? That my personal response, that was not a creative response.
Were there people?
You get what I'm saying? It was a visceral response, and
Yeah.
and the reason that business worked so well is because it was a creative response to a life situation,
right?
And my response to guard my creative life was a visceral one.
Huh.
You get what I mean? So it's kind of turned
Kinda.
on its head.
Yeah.
Where and you know what? I have to say, man, like I'm okay with my decision, and frankly, like I'm okay. I don't think I was wronged. You get what I mean? I don't feel wronged. I don't feel like it was super super tough, but I don't feel that there was any injustice. You know what I mean? Like that's not. I don't live in that space.
Good. Well, what was the political aspect of the decision? Like what made
I just meant I got to a place where I was gonna have to continue to work in a space in a way that was untenable for me.
What did that look like? In that?
I just described it.
Like masks, like telling all your like the way that you said that the people who would have succeeded, that's how they acted. That's what you mean. Like you would have had to say, oh, wear a mask and blah blah blah.
Look, it's real easy to, let's say, own a chain of hotels.
Okay.
And I mean, at some level, not even have to make those decisions.
Right.
Right. You've got some middle manager who's making that decision.
Right.
And basically, like if we can use the word karma, like the whole association with that, like, ask, which is, hey, wear this fucking mask all day long while you fill gas tanks or, pave roads or, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, do this.
You would hear
while I'm going to be in the Bahamas.
Yeah, you would hear about that, about how servers there's always this thing like, oh, it is in restaurants, all the servers have to wear masks, or all the lower, the low paying jobs those are the people who it would fall to, right? And I guess same thing with the kids had to wear masks, right? So the people who have the least power have to wear the mask.
Yeah, right. And we could dig into that stuff, right? Wait till we find out what it was for a child for 2 years not to see the face of the ones who's loved them, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to not learn micro expressions, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like whatever. So that all that stuff that like the really sort of logical, obvious stuff that people set aside because they were afraid. You know what I mean? And frankly, we have look, people decided where they wanted to stand with this thing.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, it was in my opinion, it was like our generation's Vietnam. But the irony is that, it was that divisive.
Yeah.
The difference was that it was really divided more probably by state. Like I don't know anyone else who felt like I felt. And going through, now that may not be true. It sounds like we may have a lot of alignment on this, or some alignment, but those people weren't. I wasn't accessing those people as I was going through that. It was very, very solitary, and so the
Yeah, well, it's a. I mean, I definitely get that feeling of. It was not a popular, like, to be anti-mask wasn't a popular viewpoint around here. I mean, for me, it was, yeah, it was divided by states, but also it's kind of there's a little bit of a divide by gender. Like,
Oh, really?
I mean, if I went to men's meetings, I would. That's where I'd be able to see less masks. And if,
Oh, interesting.
in a co-ed environment, it's still, that's still true. There's still a little bit of that difference.
Maybe that was like more of a pod phenomena, right? Like that particular group
Yeah.
was vibing that way.
Oh yeah, that my men's group, was not wearing masks, but there were probably other men's groups that were. Yeah, that's definitely possible.
And that's where I was going with the Vietnam comparison. I think every generation has them, but it's like there was just a real, like, we should be over there, we shouldn't be over there, right? There was a very big divide, like a philosophical divide. Although it was much more, it wasn't as clear, right? Like oh yeah, Vietnam, that's not right, right? Afghanistan, like,
Yeah.
But doing the mask, it's like it could be anybody. Like you could pick out the guy who's like, we should be in Vietnam. You could probably drive down the street and be like, oh, that guy probably thinks we should be there. That guy probably thinks we shouldn't, right? He's wearing flowers in his hair, and that guy's got a crew cut in the '60s, right?
It also seems like, I mean, the politics of it was a little bit invented. Like you mentioned, how some of the same people who would be pro mask mandate might be pro choice or something like that. But on that same note, I could easily imagine some of those people being anti-mask if the politics had been different. Like it was just who was in office at the time, and they needed to blame that person for the.
This is what I'm saying too. Is that the response to this?
Yeah.
Is so. That's why I was saying, like, so visceral. That response was visceral. The response to put those masks on was as visceral as my refusal to comply.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
there's not a lot of like room for reasoned debate. It's
I didn't find that there was. Yeah.
Huh. So, but and you had to deal with some of that within, like, just dealing with people in your business every day, or dealing with, like, as the regulations kept, or you had to keep getting new ones all the time.
Yeah, I think we tried to be really responsible.
Yeah.
But, every time someone was like, "Oh, my aunt got COVID," the whole company went and got tested. We got 20 people in cars. We canceled our appointments. But after you do it, it was like $1,400 every time we did that. And after we did that 4 or 5 times, I don't remember how many times we did it, but it was something like that. It was about that.
Yeah.
It's like there's just so much we can do. Like there's only so many cleaning of the vehicles, and like the margins aren't there to support it.
Yeah.
They weren't there in my business.
Yeah.
Like a smaller business, maybe could have done it. The same business, you know what I mean? Or a business that had services that was. I mean, there's ways, and there's these plateaus in businesses. Like there's times like when you can sustain that type of loss, and there's times when you can't. And so maybe what we saw was the people who made it through. Right. And actually we're seeing still some of that stuff, like people just can't now make it, right? They still can't, even though they made it through the toughest part.
Huh.
Right. You know what I'm talking about? I think we've seen that in restaurants, for instance.
Okay.
We've seen like some restaurants are closing kind of like after the fact.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they're pointing at crime and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But I would say probably they just have been totally taxed, man. Like
they're
just like, we're not doing any more.
One thing after another.
Yeah, right. We can't, there's no amount of like, we can't keep dancing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no more.
Yeah.
There's nothing left.
So when during 2021 did you?
We closed doors in May.
And so what's that like? How you got? You're not in a. You don't feel like a victim. Yada yada. But was there like was that a process? Was that?
Oh, dude. Let's not even that I'm not unpacking. I mean, it was just. I mean, take a 20+ person business and close it in your mind.
Yeah.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
All the everything. I mean, it's almost, some of it's not done.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? It's just like, it's so like, to finish up with the IRS. Like like just to do that stuff properly. I realized closing a business, I'm like, most people don't close businesses properly. They can't, because it took me like a year.
So that's
not every day, all day, but it just took so much time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. What was it? And what about leading up to it? Was it a lot of? I mean, was it weighing on you, like months before you did it? You're like, this is a maybe.
Look, man, I told you, Mark, I don't operate that way.
Oh yeah.
Nah, I don't. I made the decision when I made it.
Yeah.
I'd had enough that fucking day. I called a meeting. I found out who was on the team.
Yeah.
I looked at my team and I'm like, this is what this means.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, and I'm not going to ask them to do it because they probably don't actually know what they think they're signing up for.
Yeah.
They're signing up for keeping their job. That's what these people were signing up for.
Yeah.
And they trusted me.
Yeah.
Right? These people who were like, these are our problems, and I'm like, those aren't surmountable. I can't do what. That's not possible, and this be what it is. It's not. So I had a choice. My choice was, go back to like washing windows by myself with a couple people and have to close this business, which took months. It took multiple months to do. I couldn't have done it. The logistics weren't there.
Yeah.
So I made a decision and I stand by it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fuck that shit, dude. I mean, you can't have me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that can happen, Mark?
Right. Well,
what's the worst thing that can happen?
What in this context?
No, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like Guantanamo is pretty rough. Like that would be a shitty ass situation. I wasn't facing that.
Yeah.
I was facing closing a business that I had a lot of love and attachment to, and closing a business that provided my livelihood and was potentially my retirement, and starting over again.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of that shit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
And let's be fair. I started from a place of I mean, it cost me everything that I had to do it. It cost me everything, not my health, but when I say everything, I mean like all the money, all the worldly stuff. It cost me all of that. It cost me my house. It cost me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it didn't cost me all the value of my house, but I couldn't continue living in my house. I had to sell it because you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Had to move on.
Yeah.
But here we are.
So here we are in the new normal. So all right, right. So what's that? I guess because did you go through like a thing like I'm gonna travel out of like did you take a sabbatical? Did you go on a road trip? Did you leave the country? Did you or were you pretty or did you stay? Yeah, and then yeah.
Well, maybe I made it sound like it was easy. It wasn't easy. I just don't have a lot of resentment around it.
Uh-huh.
No, I spent 2 years trying to recover, like just get my brain back, my heart back.
Yeah.
It was it exhausted every bit of resource that I had to go through that.
Mm-hmm. And
on the back end of it, the recovery, moving in new space, going through my stuff, really, it took everything, man. It was the, a friend of mine calls it the four corners, man. It was sleep, eat, hydrate, exercise. And it was that on repeat every day for 2 years without a lot of work. Like it was just that. It was just like get up and face the day, So, and I mean that because like my spirit had been, I don't want to say, it was just a big transformation. So I think, if we want to feather into the new normal,
yeah.
Like a lot of people have talked about this, and it depends like which camp you want to go to, what semantics they're going to use to describe this this process, right? But we have seen a big shift, right? And there's a lot of like I think probably crappy things associated with it, but I think there's some potential and opportunities. I mean, we've got to be hopeful to some degree, or we're going to go crazy, right? Like it's not. I mean, if you've got 50 acres, you know what I mean, and you grew up around cows and horses and chicks and ducks, all that kind of stuff, and like you want to fight that fight, like I'm going to live off the land. You know what I mean? I'm going to work at a truck stop. But I'm biding time because I know this thing's going to hell in a handbasket. And I'm set up, man. I got my bunker, and you know what I mean? And I'm not throwing shade there either. I'm just saying, like, if you're built that way and you've got those resources, fine, you can fight that fight at another level. But if you live in a city and you have all your life and your family and your friends and all your experience is with that life, then the choice is, am I going to bag out to a third world country and start again there with, go get myself a senorita and like open a little cafe shop or whatever, right? Or am I going to, get a trailer and park it on an acre and dig a well and like just check out there? Or am I going to stand where I stood and do what I do? And I don't think anyone's better or worse. It's I may find myself in any one of those other situations yet. But my decision was to stand where I stood, and I got up every day and I walked my fucking neighborhood, man. You know what I mean? I showed my face, and tried to be me, which took every ounce of my being to do, and that may be harder. That's like shrink time, right? Like that's a very personal thing. But people have heard many people talk about their journey, their personal process, and I think a lot of people purged a lot of things. Relationships ended and jobs ended, and people moved because the economy changed for them, and then we've got this other stuff, this other sort of like adjacent, political and, lifestyle stuff that probably goes hand in hand with, a transition into the electronic information age. You know what I mean? It's kind of like back end stuff of that, like the idea that that we're doing a podcast here and that, that people make a living, like sitting, that comedians sit on a sofa and talk about dicks and their menstrual flow, as part of like their open mic shtick, right? Like that's how they're open micing the world, is electronically. Like there's no getting around that unless one gets that trailer or goes to that third world country, or you get what I mean?
But and even they need to have a fortune, and they need to have 50 acres, or they, right? Like it's kind of. Or
you got to be comfortable living without shoes and just walking around and parking your trailer on some national park land. And
true.
I mean, people do that, right?
True.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we have to know who we are, and we have to come to terms with who we are and what we're willing to sacrifice to be who we are.
Well, I was thinking
and do what we have to do.
That new normal phrase could be like, you could answer it very personally because you had that, that's, so now it's like for you it is the, like, like what you're gonna do now is like whatever the new normal is, like, but but also I like what you were saying about everything changing, or the change that happened. I mean, it was okay, there's a pandemic, and then it'll be locked down, and then it's over. But yeah, there was a change in the there's a change in the culture with and it was George Floyd, and it was Trump, and whatever. But then there's also this change. Yeah, the change in the economy is what you kind of I guess. Yeah, there's a change in the economy too, and so I guess can you? I mean, this is I guess one of those broad questions, but like. Well, what is the change in the economy? Like, what's the economy like now? From a business perspective, or from a businessman's perspective, what's the new normal of the economy?
I don't know that I have that answer, man.
Yeah.
I think we're still. I think that fight's still being fought, right? And you look at like electronic currencies, and how that's going to play out. Whether that turns out to be a really good thing for us, or whether it's a really bad thing. or whether it's a little bit of both. I think that still has yet to be discovered. I think that's why one has to, stand where they stand, and then try to mitigate with that with a little bit of hope.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But hope's not always there, man. And when hope's not there, all you got is your choice about whether you're going to stand where you stand or move.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And even when we stand where we stand, you think about like standing on the edge of like you go to the ocean and that wave comes and you could stand there, bro, but maybe not when the right wave comes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, that goes back to like a surfing metaphor, which you kind of made when you talked about starting your business. You were, well, I don't know if you used the ocean in that example, but you talked about like, you're about to have a kid, and that's about to crash on you. But like when a wave's about to crash on you, those are the ones that you catch.
Oh yeah, we talked about.
You became your business thrived at that point, and maybe motivated
and
by
the housing market.
Impending
the housing market.
Yeah. So I guess so part of it, standing where you stand, is just standing in California, which is like maybe the experience is the most extreme, or like the I guess or maybe it's not the most extreme, but it's one side of the political spectrum is here in California, or we looked at it maybe it's the most, I don't know, it's the liberal side and whatever that is. Okay, so well, tell me what you're up to now. Like, what is the where are you, how?
Well, let's do this.
Oh yeah,
let's
please.
unpack the term new normal.
Yeah, okay.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
All right. So, I remember in middle school they were always like, Webster's dictionary defines prosperity as. Remember that? You know what I'm talking about? That was like one of those real basic tools for like starting out a report.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so new in the Oxford Dictionary, the first definition is having existed or having been made but a short time, having originated or occurred lately, not early or long in being, recent, fresh, modern. Okay, so that's new. And
what's new? That's what people always say. I mean, it's not it's not a deep question. It's just what's the latest? What's the gossip?
Yeah, that's new. And normal is a really interesting one. So normal, forming a right angle. This is the very first definition of normal, is forming a right angle, perpendicular.
Huh. I forgot that.
Perpendicular.
Yeah.
According to
I'm a math guy.
constituting or not deviating from an established norm, rule, or principle. So the new normal, it's like to not deviate from an established principle. There can't be a new normal. There's only normal. There's only ever what it has been, but it's got a fresh face, babe.
Okay.
And it wears a mask. I don't know. No, I mean, but that's normal, right? So I found that just to be so compellingly interesting. Like normal is not new.
Yeah.
That's it's like absolutely not new. It's normal. So I think when we think about like what's the new normal, it might be interesting to kind of to say, well, what we're really asking is like, what change came?
Yeah.
Right? What's the flavor of this change?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
What's the gestalt? What's the zeitgeist?
That's right.
That's what we're asking.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So, again, I think it depends on what camp you go to, what answer you're going to get. And so you asked about economy, and I shy away from that a little bit because I'm not an economist. Like that's not I don't live there. I was a business person, but it wasn't the love of money for me that built the business. It was the love of service. It was the love of doing really good work. And honestly, in window washing, like let's say there's 3 windows here, right? Every time one of those is done, it's done. Now it needs doing again maybe next year, but it's done. Not a lot of things are like that. Like you weed the garden. When you're done, it's done. Right? And that was some of the stuff that drew me to that. As a young person who had the physicality to accomplish that stuff, who had the zeal and maybe a bit of naivete to like think that people really fucking cared. You know what I mean? About my zeal. And the new normal for me over those 20 years, the difference now, and just because, you know, like moving into that space with that energy, that's kind of still the guy I was at the back end of it. So digesting over the last 2 years, like, what am I without? Not just that, but a lot of other things in my life have changed too. And I'm sort of set that aside. But without those things, like you said, you know, my son aged up to a point where he doesn't really need kids always need their parents, but it's not like you need to pick them at school, right? Like they're coming to you for advice every day, and they're coming to me for some money periodically. But you know what I mean? Like the kids they're kind of growing at that age. You know what I mean? So like so much has changed. Like what are the personal identifiers? Like who am I? Right? Because fundamentally, if we're standing where we stand, none of that's changed. Who am I? But all the levers are moved. Like because now, like, what lever do I pull to get money? What lever do I pull to get a little bit of sunshine in my day, right? Like just from doing a good job for somebody or helping out an employee or, you know, picking my kid up and making him a nice meal, right? Like those things, for me personally, shifted. And so having to rediscover, like, and I think it's still occurring, but I'm in a stronger place with it. Like having to discover how to leverage the principles that are, you know, personally relevant and important towards creating a life that's tenable, if not joyful, right? Is my new normal. And I think that's where we as a society have the opportunity. Like we are moving into a space of potentially digital currencies. We are moving into a space of remote work. We are moving into like all these things, right? Which I think are the zeitgeist. They follow each other. We are moving into a space where civil liberties have been curtailed considerably, and things like digital currencies, you know, we're supposed to emancipate us, but let's be fair. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to turn off somebody's bank account. Way easier.
Let's not be naive. Yeah,
right. It's way easier to turn off somebody's bank account. Like a guy can have $10,000 in his closet and get by for quite a while. But if cash isn't a thing,
can't do that.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and you know, with the cameras you know, I mean, the idea that cameras are going to solve the crime problem in a city where we have the grass smash and grab and run red lights and all that stuff, it's crazy, right? I mean, who's going to prosecute those things? You mail a letter. The only people who are going to do that is the middle class. The middle class are going to pay the goddamn fine for the red light that they ran. But the kid who can't afford to pay it, he's not going to pay it. Right. And so what do you do? And like we keep throwing this money at like we want to keep throwing money at the police. We want it there. But we continue to have these fundamental underlying normal issues, right? Go read some Dickens, right? Go read some Shakespeare. Read The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Like all the problems, it's very normal, man. We're having the same problems that we've always had. The American dream, right? This respite that we had in this brief blink in history.
Oh, I like that.
Where everybody had what they needed. You know what I mean?
Like the 1950s?
And what they wanted. Yeah, man. Like
45 to 55, something like that.
Yeah, like, you know, basically a 50-year period. You know, maybe you could stretch it out and call it 200 of like a real transformative time for humans. Like, it's just not here. Like we have the choice to make now. Like what pieces of that are we going to salvage? What parts of like that American graffiti freedom, you know, Happy Days freedom, are we going to actually? No, really, are we going to?
I haven't seen American Graffiti. Happy Days. That's what I
Happy Days
sort of chuckle
is the TV sitcom spinoff of that type of vibe. That vibe. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
American Graffiti, that was a George Lucas.
was it? That was his first thing.
Maybe I don't know if it was first, but yeah, the first thing I can recall.
It does seem like, when you with the definition of normal, like, yeah, normal is always sort of construction of like, and it reminds me of is like when your office or your workplace says like, oh, we have to come up with norms, or let's have norms for as a teacher, you do that. All right, children, we got to come up with some norms. But it's like that. You kind of decide what you want. Your norm. Yeah, it's part of like it's an intentional thing. Like it's an aspirational thing. Like, okay, this is what my norms are going to be. This is what I'd like normal to be around here.
What do you see that as for yourself then? I mean, obviously, as the host of the podcast, it's not necessarily supposed to be about the host, but I'm interested. What's the new norm? Because this is a topic that you became interested in. What made this topic interesting for you?
Well, because it was such a disruption, and then there's this. I just wonder if so the idea
when
of
you say disruption, is that a disruption that you felt?
Maybe it's this. It's
saw?
like maybe it's that I think nostalgically, and so there's that sense of like, oh, things were I'm so part of what I find myself doing repeatedly, and maybe I should ask myself more why I'm doing that, is like wanting to look back and say like, when did things just get weird, and was there a point where they were like, like you said, maybe the 50s, or like with the GI Bill, but I mean even in my life, I have like this like I look nostalgically at like the 80s or the 90s or even the aughts and even the early 10s. I look kind of nostalgically at now because I mean I got sober in 2010, so that that seemed like a relatively carefree time to me also. But then there's some of these things that that happened. Obviously, there was something bubbling up that led to them, and I don't know. So I think about like before the pandemic and before Trump. I think that there was sort of this sense of I had this sense of like media and higher education being like responsible institutions that like could be trusted to do certain things, and then I no longer feel like I feel much less trusting of those institutions, and so there's this sense of like, well, what is like, how do we handle the fact that things have changed this way is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, how do we and I think what I hear you saying is, well, you still handle it's still life, and in a way it was always like. If you asked me at any time, when I refer to whole years, you don't experience a year as a year. You don't just that's looking back. You experience the year as a series of moments, and they're all a lot like this one, right? Like, there's filled with a lot of good, a lot of bad, but like all the tension and the responsibility of choice is always on us. And what did you say? We have to make. Find a way to make our values like reflect our own values into this, and yeah, I mean I like, yeah, so that's kind of where I feel like I'm talking about it because it's a little bit like, well, that was traumatic, that was traumatic. Or can we get back to normal, or like what does that even mean? And yeah.
Right. Well, it's innocence lost. Lost, and that's another aspect of how this may parallel Vietnam. It's like, that was a time when there were 3 channels on the TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There were 3 channels, and the news was pretty consistent on every one of those channels, and frankly, it was irregardless of what we look back and say, "Oh God, the whole Vietnam thing was a lie," But okay, but largely, information was curated much better than it is today, right? You go online today and you can see really intelligent people saying just about anything that you want to hear, and that wasn't true then. Everyone had a shared. I mean, if you want to call it illusion, even, right? But but it was a shared one. And now the base, there's just a lot of different camps,
Yeah.
and there's some overlap, right? And there's some collaboration, there's some bickering, and that stuff's always been the case. But I think on the street, where we used to have problems with blacks and whites, now we've got just like there's so much shifting in subtle shifts in and those shifts attach themselves to the economy and to race and to gender now and to access and to like all these things, but those shifts are just kind of happening. You know what I mean? And when in the old days, coming back to like the gatekeepers, and like the 3 channels, like we assigned meaning to these things as a group. Well,
Mhm.
it was done top down, but it was pretty well agreed upon by the population. I don't think we weren't just hamsters.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We weren't hamsters. There was an alignment. It was pretty much an alignment about what was until Vietnam, right? From the Great Generation, from the Great Depression to the Great Generation, from World War II to Vietnam, things were pretty aligned. And one could argue that, the me generation, who, kind of responded to the Great Generation, their parents, in attempts to make a brighter future somehow, in this corner of the world,
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, right? Also had their story that they were telling, right?
Yeah.
And we grew up with that story, and so it became true, but it's a story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people who are widely traveled, and that's not myself, but I know enough about traveling and other people who travel. I have traveled, but know that it's a story, right? Because you can go all sorts of places and see all kinds of things in this world. And so the exciting thing about all these competing notions is that what we really have is we have this smorgasbord, right?
Yeah.
But it's just overwhelming. It's so much noise. It's so much noise. And the physiological response to that, the biological response to that when it's poorly managed, right? Because what it does is upsets the power structures, right?
Yeah.
And let's be fair, I like power structures.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to be able to go to a grocery store and buy
Same.
groceries.
Same.
I you know what I mean? I like to know that if somebody...
Of course, I don't like them in theoretic. Like I don't like the man. Down with the man. But yeah, of course, I like power structures too. And I say that jokingly, just having watched School of Rock, and he tells the kids you got to stick it to the man.
Well, you should.
We all
stick
talk
it to the
that
man.
way.
No,
but,
you
yeah.
should stick it to the man. That's the job.
Yes.
That's the job. And
Yes.
and frankly, it's the kid's job largely.
Yeah.
Okay, like that's so like there's
That's
this
interesting.
whole like tilling of the soil thing happening. You know what I mean? It's just getting ground under all the time, and we forget. We periodically wake up to it and remember, and sometimes we do it individually, and sometimes we do it more collectively. And when we're doing it collectively, those power structures are struggling to maintain. And let's be fair. If our police and all that stuff went away tomorrow, that wouldn't be a good thing. We're not in a good place for that yet. Now,
Right.
if we could start investing in making sure that everyone's loved and fed and got clean water and education and access to the things that most industrialized nations have, right? And I'm
Mhm.
not talking about Gucci bags and skateboards and I'm just talking about like a real good whole life, a safe, clean life with access to the basics, right? Then all this other stuff, it doesn't really matter on some level. Maybe it would find a way. It would find a way. But I think we have that opportunity now. We're like, okay, we've got a lot of different directions we could go. But maybe like we all just had to do, maybe we need to go in a little bit. It's not fun. You know what I mean? It's not fun. And it's a lot of,
Did you have any of this? Like, I mean, I know that part of I think maybe how I experienced the pandemic and maybe the trauma, my trauma with it was that, they told me to go home, like, and I was in school at the time. I was getting my master's, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, school's canceled, but we're meeting on Zoom. Well, I remember when when I was in high school, it was junior in high school, senior in high school, I decided I was too sick to stay in school and it was NCAA tournament first round day, and I went home and I was watching games. I was like, this is the best day ever. And so being sent home a little, there's probably a part of me that liked it. Like, oh yeah, I don't have to, I'm going home and that,
right.
and that's saving people. Great. And then what ended up happening is I became more addicted. I'm a screenaholic. I became more addicted to this. Like, I went to Zoom meetings for things that I used to go to in-person meetings for, and whereas in those in-person meetings I would have the discipline not to take out my phone during the meeting, at the Zoom meeting I'm like, you can't tell me I can't tab around on this laptop that you're telling me I have to be on all the time. And now so the new normal for me a little bit is like, oh, I'm not as good with, I'm worse on the phone thing, and that's, did you experience a little bit of that, also? Like, was there, where are you at with your,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Definitely, because of the last 2 years where I've been working, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And like I said, kind of just doing those four corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been watching, maybe not more TV, but when it feels like junk food when there's not other soul food coming in.
Yeah.
Right? When there's not a job, when there's not a relationship, when there's not
Yep.
a hobby, and it seems like, oh well, you should just go to an archery class. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Everything got ruined. Like the whole smorgasbord for me was just I just didn't want any of it. I didn't have an appetite anymore.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But yes, when you start to come back from that, you're like, and you start digging out, you're like, oh, all my networks are dead, but Instagram is there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the tendency to do that, I think it's really important to exercise some restraint to the degree one can. Of course, that continuum is pretty long too. You can cut everything out of your life and just, sleep on a hardwood floor with a,
that's what I was saying. I like, like you can say, oh, I'm addicted to food, but I'm not gonna, I don't know. There's varying. You have to eat a balanced diet. You don't want to quit eating,
Yeah.
And
we didn't grow up in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
We just didn't. That's not what our biology is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not an excuse for going out and eating bags of Ruffles and throwing, buying your grapes in plastic boxes and throwing the plastic boxes on the street. Like, it's not an argument for that, but it is an argument for we live in a certain time and a place, and I think we have some responsibility to take the very best of what has been handed us, and maybe weed out some of the stuff that's not so great, right? But that's the thing. Like, if we can shut down our economy, here's the thing: if we can shut down our economy, we can solve homelessness. Not even solve it. We can approach homelessness. If we can shut down our global economy. I mean, and now, I could look at this stuff. There's all kinds of repercussions in shipping and all sorts of stuff that's come out of this, right? Like, if we can make those sacrifices, right? If we can rejigger all of that stuff, maybe we could rejigger the way that we deliver food to each other. Maybe we can rejigger, and look, maybe Monsanto can still be the provider, but they've got to stop poisoning our food and land. I don't know anything about Monsanto really. I know that comes up in that's the big ugly name, right? But you get what I mean. Like, maybe there's a way to
these sound like entrepreneurial ideas. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, this is somebody could come up with a business that
So there's normal, because that's who I am.
Yeah.
But when there's no, argument, you say, if you give me a lever long enough, I'll move the world, right? Also a fulcrum. You got to have something to lay that lever up against, or it's got no leverage.
We gotta be tethered to reality, kind of.
No, I just mean to say, like, you can be as creative as you fucking want in a closet.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not, it's just
Well, yeah, it is,
the
but
playground's a lot smaller. You
it
know
is-
what I mean? The
it is being
possibilities,
it is being tethered to reality, though. It is, like, yeah, you gotta work with what
the
work with
parameters
the world
you
that you
got.
live in. Yeah.
Right. You got to work with what you got. And so, but
The
it's-
market.
yeah, it's easy to like turn on to Instagram and or where does one begin to collaborate to make some of the changes that we all agree, and there wouldn't be a lot of pushback. I mean, the budget for homelessness in California is super huge. It's billions of dollars. Like, when you start to look at the numbers, it's like, I forget what they do, but it's like 100,000 plus per homeless person,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is budgeted for this. But it goes away in admin, and I don't pretend to have the answer, but I do say, there's something to be explored there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I guess when you hear about waste taking place, it's like, well, that's an opportunity to improve a situation or whatever.
Right.
These big bureaucracies seem like, of course they have an inertia to them. It's going to take, like,
Well, you need inspectors for the inspectors.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that was Burroughs' comment.
yeah?
So you need inspectors you need inspectors to inspect the inspectors, what the inspectors are inspecting.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in the bureaucracy, and it just eats all the capital that I mean, like, look, I don't have fine, take my money, but give me, but 85 new roads every 85 years. We could work something out on the
could do better.
libraries
We
and
could
the
do-
schools and the cops and the
Yeah.
public lands and all that stuff. I mean,
Yeah. 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 No. Well, that. So. I feel like I have plenty more questions, but there's kind of an arc there to the story. Like, I feel like we got through.
yeah, we did. I think we really
chronology
covered a lot of land, a lot of territory.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah. Well, you want to take a break, or you want to just call it for the night, or what's your schedule like? What are you up to?
What time is it? Where are we at?
7:15. No, no, it's almost 8 actually. 7:55. We're an hour and 15 minutes in on the.
Okay. Well, whatever. We've had a great conversation, and there's not a whole lot. We could go on for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe we've.
Yeah. Let's call this one.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot, Dylan. Good to see you as always.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Right on. Appreciate.
Right on.